absolutely abject poor. Corner, there was a little small.
Scott Shellady, where were you born, my friend?
I was hatched in Des Moines, Iowa. So I have it's not very.
Scott Shellady, where were you? Scott Shellady, where were you born, my friend?
I was hatched in Des Moines, Iowa. So I have it's not very well known that I have a lot of ties to Iowa. My father was from Muscatine, Iowa, which is on the banks of the Mississippi River across from Illinois. It's actually the only place in the Mississippi River where the river kind of runs east and west. And the town was founded on the fact that a lot of shells would get hung up in the water as it kind of came down from Minnesota and northern Illinois, and kind of would get hung up on that little turn it would take. And the shells, they'd harvest the shells out of the river and stamp buttons out of them a long, long time ago. But when plastic came around and Bakelite came around, my dad's hometown kind of went down the road like Gary, Indiana. So it lost a lot of its capital. But my mother, she went to Roosevelt High School in Des Moines, Iowa. My dad went to Muscatine High, and they both met at Drake University in Des Moines, where my father got a full ride to play college football. And so the interesting part about my beginnings, I think probably some of the most interesting is that my mother was very middle class. Her father was a sergeant colonel in World War II. He was an officer, so we've got some great stories about that. But my father was the interesting one because he was so poor. It's hard to say. It's hard to explain. He's probably one of the poorest people I would have ever known had I known him when he was a kid. They didn't have a house with an address. They lived at the end of a dirt little path. It was a corrugated tin roof. When my father got the full ride to play football at Drake University, when he flipped on the light switch in his dorm room his freshman year, that was the first time in his entire life they had running water and electricity in his house. He never, until he went to college, had running water and electricity in his home. And so, he would go down to Salvation Army every August to get clothes for school. All summer long, he had no shoes. I mean, absolutely abject poor. To the point where he collected old wood stoves when he was older in life, just to remind him where he came from, because his background was so rough. And I experienced it because I would go to his parents' house, my grandparents' house on my dad's side, and they had a mud floor in their basement. I mean, mud. There was no concrete, and they didn't have any running water except for at the bottom in the basement at the far corner. There was a little small cement pad, probably about 3 foot by 3 foot, like a square yard, with a drain in the middle of it, and overhead was an old-fashioned, a big a big shower head, and you pulled the chain, and all you got was cold water, and you stood underneath it, and that was where you took your shower. That's the only place in the house that had running water when I would go visit my grandparents. So he came from absolutely less than nothing, and football was his way out of that town, and he met my mother, and shortly after their marriage, after they got out of college, I came along. So I started in Des Moines, Iowa, where my father had gotten lucky enough to get a job with Cargill. Everybody knows Cargill from the grain business. They're the largest privately held commercial grain company in the world, and they still are private. And the rest was really kind of history. We traveled around the country. I'll say this. I know we're going to talk about me, but this is an interesting story because it just goes to show you how life can take some funny turns. But my father got a job with Cargill in 1962, and they immediately put him on the worst thing you could be, and that's he was there to sell salt. Cargill sells salt. They still do, I think. And they gave him a company car, and they told him he had a 4 or 5 state Midwestern area. So from Des Moines, he took off driving east, and then was trying to hit up as many places as he could to try to sell them salt. And he finally came around the bend of Lake Michigan. This is before the Skyway and everything, right? And he saw this massive building right on the water, and he thought, well, I wonder if they use salt. And as it happens, before they had security and everything that we have nowadays, he was able to get into the building, holding his Cargill sales brochures and maybe a Cargill button. And he got up to the procurement manager, and he was lucky enough to get in front of him. And the gentleman there says, I'm sorry, son. I don't know if you know where you're at. My father says, I actually don't even know what this building is for. And he says, well, you're at U.S. Steel. And my father then promptly started to gather his things and said, I'm so sorry. I'm here to sell salt. If I would have known better, I wouldn't have wasted your time. And the man's like, no. Sit down, son. We're one of the biggest users of salt in the country. And shockingly enough, I don't know why in their smelting process or whatever, but as my father drove back to Des Moines, they immediately took him off of that account and gave him a promotion to move the family up to Lake Minnetonka up in Minnesota, where the headquarters are of Cargill, and made my father a cash grain trader, the head cash grain trader, and gave the U.S. Steel salt account to some other big shot in Des Moines. But a funny story about how you just actually, you bump into the thing. And, Cargill still has a grain elevator there. And I have been in the south side of Chicago over by Whiting. There are some ball fields there that have some placards, very old, washed out plywood placards that kind of line the outfield wall that still say Cargill Salt. Because my dad did some time working at that Cargill elevator there. So we have really strong roots to the Midwest, but especially strong to Iowa. My mom's family is actually from Iowa, but they're from Dubuque, which is the upper right-hand corner, so the northeast corner, which is across the river from Galena, where our farm was. But my mom's family has a big burial plot up there that overlooks the Mississippi River. My parents are both there. My grandparents on her side are both there. My dad, my daughter, and my brother all buried there now. So we have a big shelley plot in Iowa. So when I talk to the people from that great state, I tell them I have a lot of ties to Des Moines and Muscatine and Dubuque and a few other smaller towns in between. But yeah, it's interesting beginnings, especially when you talk about it from my father's point of view.
So he came from this pretty poor atmosphere. What kind of guy was he? What was he like?
Well, my father was naturally gregarious and also very smart. He was very, very quick. He didn't do well in school because I think they would have diagnosed him with ADHD back in the day, but they didn't have it then. But he was, he got his energy out in athletics, and he was good enough in school that he was able to get that scholarship to play football. He also was a fantastic tennis player, and he played racquetball up until he got Alzheimer's. That was his undoing. But he was very naturally well liked and just a ton of fun. Very quick witted again, and he had a lot of experience because he was from the, I don't know how to say this, but he was from a family of Dutch reformists. Dutch Reform is a religion, and the religion teaches you that everybody else is better than you are. It's really a weird thing. So he said, he naturally was brought up to look up to everybody, no matter race, sex, gender, it didn't matter. He was always taught that he looked up to everybody. And so that endeared him, and engendered him to have this personality where he was everybody's best friend right away. He didn't see anything different than anybody. No judging about anything. It was just a lot of fun. And my father and I were best friends. He was a lot of fun. The best time of my life was when I came back from London, and we'll get there later on. But I was able to work with my father side by side in the training pits for 1 year, and it was the best year of my life because he was just, he had the same mentality I did, where I was, 42. He was 62 or 61, and for 1 year we got to go shoulder to shoulder, and it was a ton of fun. So he was. Let's put it this way: when he passed away, the Chicago Tribune took a full page of the business section of the Sunday Trib and dedicated it to my father. He was well known in the city of Chicago. well known in the business world of trading, financial world, and it was a real great tribute to a guy that had been in the city for a long time, and a lot of people knew him as a financier and a trader, and it was a ton of fun. If my dad was in a restaurant on a Friday night, everybody's meal was getting paid for. He just loved to have fun, and he also could back it up. So it was great growing up with him. He kind of overshadowed you a lot, but if you learn to hang with him, it did you well in life yourself, because he taught us all some great lessons, and also because of his background. We all, as kids, I had a younger brother and a sister. My younger brother passed away, but all three of us learned the value of a dollar. I actually was doing a show this morning, and because my father always wanted to get the newspaper before everybody else did on the block, and my dad helped support his family by being a paper boy. I think I was in my third grade. My dad made me get a paper out, Chicago Tribune, Sun-Times, and the Daily Herald, or whatever it was, Chicago Daily News, I think it was. And I just so my dad could get all the papers dropped off at the end of our driveway from the news agency in Naperville, next to the train station. So at 3 a.m, he'd get his newspaper. He'd have them all folded for me. So he'd get me up at 4 o'clock. I'd come down. I'd go deliver about 100 papers in the morning. It'd take me an hour and a half. I'd get back at 5:30. I'd go back to sleep and get up for school at 7. So that was how crazy it was. And I did that till I went to high school. My father wanted to teach me the value of a dollar and responsibility. So it was a great lesson learned. And the reason that I came up is I don't think we have paper boys anymore, but it was we talked about it because of I think the Chicago area is going through the snowiest start since 1978, and that was one of the years I was carrying papers. And actually was the year that I got my first trophy. My first trophy was from the Chicago Tribune because I was Paper Boy of the Month during one of the blizzard months in 1978, because I had my old man there making sure that we got up at 3 o'clock. If those papers were sitting in snow and they got wet, he'd put the whole bundle in the oven and cook them for about 40 minutes until they all dried out, and then he'd fold them for me. So he didn't want any of the customers getting wet papers. So pretty amazing person. And I mean, just a great dad to have. I mean, both my parents. I grew up with two fantastic parents that I really relied on for a lot of the lessons in life, even after they've been gone.
What was it like when you went into a restaurant in Chicago, a big trader, Board of Trade guy, and you're tagging along? Describe that.
Well, I mean, at first as a kid, you're kind of embarrassed, for the attention that sometimes he would garner. But and then my brother and I used to call out the $20 babysitter, because he'd give us a roll of quarters and tell us to go play the jukebox for a little while or whatever. And we had a sign. It'll show you how old I am. But he'd say, when you guys get sick and tired of this and you want to go home, our song, it was like, how you have a safe word today? Our song to ask my dad to go home was tie another yellow ribbon around the old oak tree. So he heard us play that on the jukebox late at night. It was time for him to put the beer down and let's get out of here. So we would, he always had a crowd around him. It was fun. And like I said, a lot of people knew who he was. And back in the go-go days, let's just talk about the 70s for a little while, Jim. I mean, my father is in his 30s and he's making more than the highest paid player on the Cubs. Now, the professional athletes hadn't really exploded in money yet. Obviously, a lot of them had second jobs. Glenn Beckert was the second baseman for the Cubs in the 70s, and my father shared an office with him. We would often take our vacations during spring break when I was a kid down to Arizona and stay where the Cubs used to, train. And a lot of those guys had places that they had to leave because they had to come up for opening day, and we would get to stay at a lot of those places for free. And that's another part of the story that people should know, is that my dad was almost 100%. I mean, he's 100% American, but ethnicity-wise, we were almost 100% Dutch. And he was so proud of his Dutch heritage because the Dutch are the cheapest people in the world. And he would brag about how cheap he was, to the point where it'd make my mother almost throw up, because, she would complain about him not ever buying a nice car, or, he couldn't understand why anybody would wear one more, have more than one pair of shoes, because you only had one pair of feet. You could only wear one pair at a time. I don't need no. Why do you need two pairs? That kind of stuff he'd say all the time. And when my mother would want a new Mercedes or a new brand new car, he would, say it was back then expensive, 50, 60 grand for a Cadillac or Mercedes. And he would hum and haw, and it would take her about 6 months before she'd finally get it out of him. But then he'd turn around and, spend $500,000 or $600,000 on a combine, and there'd be a very tense family discussion. But my father would have to explain to my mother, one of those two assets makes me money, and the other one costs me money. So, that was back when we had our farm, and he would be buying stuff for, he always bought land with his money because, he knew there was only so much of it. But back to your initial point, he just garnered a lot of attention. He was a very big guy. He played college football, so he's about 6'1", 250, 60 pounds, and he was in great shape. Up until the day he got diagnosed with Alzheimer's, he could take one of those 5-gallon pails you get at Home Depot. He could fill that with grain, and he could lift it over a chest-high fence with one arm. So he was still really strong into his early 60s. So yeah, it was just a lot of fun, and he had to entertain a lot, so he was pretty good at making having jokes and having a few beers, and he never got too out of hand. But there was a few times at our house where I'd have to come down the stairs at 1 a.m. and ask everybody to be quiet because I couldn't sleep, or turn off the player. Remember the player pianos everybody used to have? We had a player piano, and that thing would be going like crazy, and we'd have to wipe the sleep out of our eyes until I asked my parents to please be quiet. But yeah, it was. I mean, I had a Norman Rockwellian upbringing. It was a lot of fun, and yeah, it was of the times. It was great. So yeah, I don't have any regrets about my upbringing at all. It was fantastic.
What was your little brother's name?
My brother was named Mark. As our family goes, I was born first. My brother was 18 months behind me. Sometimes they say that's Irish twins, and then my sister was another 3.5 years behind him. But there's about 4 years between my sister and I, maybe 4.5. But he got everything. He was tall, great shape, thin, good looks. I got, I'm short and dumpy. And then my sister was, she came out, she's tall. My sister's 6 foot tall. She's got great looks as well. I was the first one out, and I was the runt. But I used to tell my sister all the time, you should never get in a fight with your brother Mark, because just know for sure that if he came out a girl, you would not be here. So I said, make sure that you're very aware of that. And she didn't understand it when she was a little kid. But yeah, so the three of us, it was a great. There's 5 in the family total. So we had a lot of fun, and it was fun with our farm. We get to go up there and ride snowmobiles and motorcycles, and my father kind of bribed us with those toys to get us to go up there, because usually we had to go up there, we had to do a lot of work. So there was always something to do, and so my mother made him get some stuff for the kids to make it more fun for us to go up there. So we get to tool around on our snowmobiles in the winter and motorcycles in the summer, and every now and then they'd take us out to the local tavern where my dad would have a few beers and give us the quarters, and if we wanted to go home, we just put Tony tie another yellow ribbon around the old oak tree by Tony, Orlando, and Don, and that was our little safe word. But yeah, I've got stories upon stories, but it was a lot of fun, and again, spending a lot of that time, Chicago and Iowa and that little area there between Chicago and say Des Moines, a lot of miles in my 60 years in between those two places.
Your brother, how old was he when he passed?
He was 51, so he got diagnosed with terminal brain cancer when he was 50, and they gave him 16 months to live, and then basically he died right on schedule. When he had brain cancer, and when you have cancer that starts in the brain, usually when everybody thinks of brain cancer, I used to think of it like as a golf ball tumor, but that's not the case. When there's something called a gliosarcoma, and really what it is it's like a spider web of cancer, and it drills down like stalactites into your brain. so you can't really operate and pull it out. It's like, they're like little tentacles that go throughout your gray matter. They try to get the big parts, and he did go through 3 brain surgeries where he had to learn to walk and talk again. Poor fella. I mean, it's horrible. But and he did it to fight to see what he could do, and in the end, it got him. And 51's pretty young. He has 3 kids. I've got 2 nephews and a niece. And it was pretty tough. But he, yeah. Well, I mean, he got 51 years of being the best looking one in the house, so he had a good time too. But my dad had 2 sons, where my brother was an All-American baseball player. I was an All-State football player. And so he had a lot of fun watching his kids play. I mean, I don't know how many times my parents got to go to games where I'm the starting nose guard, my brother's the starting right defensive end, or I'm the center, my brother's the quarterback, or my brother got a full ride to play baseball in Indiana, so I'd be the catcher and he'd be the pitcher in high school. I mean, it must have been a lot of fun to be our parents getting to go watch all that stuff. So it was a good time.
Your sister was part of all that?
Yeah, she was a jock too. We make fun of her about it today. But she played basketball and volleyball in high school, and she traveled around with us. And she was part of the cheerleading squad, but also was a really good athlete herself. My dad was a great athlete. My mom wasn't too bad, but a lot of that came from my father and the discipline that came with that. And my dad would, a lot of times he coached a lot of the sports we were in, most of them, mostly football. And he always was very cognizant of the fact that he didn't want anybody to think that he favored his sons. And so if there was anything that went wrong at practice at all, out of the ordinary, anything that went wrong, he would tell myself and my brother to start running until he got sick of watching us run. Nobody else on the team. I mean, we would come home crying every day after practice to my mom about how my dad makes us run and nobody else makes us run. But my dad just didn't want anybody to think that he was favoring his kids. So, but we were good. Just to give you an idea about, this is back in the 70s too, right? He took 2 teams, two 8th grade teams as a coach to the Pop Warner Super Bowl in Tewksbury, Massachusetts. Now they hold it down in Miami. But in a span of 3 or 4 years, he took 2 teams to the national championship game. And because he was an offensive-minded coach, and what he would do, this is great. Back in the day, all these kids thought everybody was going to be a great fullback, running back, tight end, whatever. He would hold tryouts for this 8th grade team that he coached right before high school. And he'd pick the best 60 kids, right? And then of those 60 kids, he'd have another mini tryout to see what positions these kids were going to play. And at the end of it, he would give out, the positions and what position each kid was going to be. But we go back to the house. Remember, you had the kitchen phone that had the really long cord on it? Well, he would make me sit in the kitchen waiting for the phone to ring and tell everybody that he wasn't available, because what he would do is he would take the 5 best athletes on the team and make them offensive linemen and say that if these guys block the way that I think they can block, anybody can run through a hole. And so he would make the 5 best athletes offensive linemen, and then we would kill everybody every year because we had such great blocking up front. Spanky could get 5 yards. And back before there was any headsets involved, he would always outsmart the other team because you'd have to run the plays in all the time, right? Well, the play would come into the huddle, 32 dive right until you don't get 4 yards, which meant that if we got 4 yards on that play, we'd just run it again. We just get up the line and run it again. And the other team would think, well, they're not going to run it 3 times in a row. Well, they can't possibly run it 7 times in a row. Well, on the 18th time, we go over the goal line. We would sometimes run 32 dive right from our own 20 and score and take up the whole first quarter doing it because everybody thought there's no way he's going to run that play 20 times in a row. But as long as we got 4 yards, we would. So lots of fun. And he ended up having some championship teams over it. And they asked him to coach high school football, but back then you had to have a teacher certificate, and he just didn't have the time as he was still trading downtown. So, and my sister got involved. She was a cheerleader of that stuff. And again, she was her own athlete herself. But a lot of great lessons, a lot of great lessons of all those, life's not fair. The penalties that he would make us do when we were playing, like if somebody was offsides as an offensive lineman, he would let that whoever was offsides would have to sit and watch the other 4 offensive linemen run laps until they threw up. I mean, I'll talk about pressure. So there was a lot of I loved it because it was great lessons in life, but at a young age, and a lot of guys needed it, and a lot of people came back and told us that a lot of the things that he instilled in them they use till today, and it was great because it wasn't great. Man, my dad passed, but after they had the full page dedication to him in the Chicago Tribune business section on a Sunday, I got a call from WGN, and they did a half-hour radio show with me on my father's passing too. So pretty impressionable, a lot of fun, great time. Just I'm sad it ended so soon.
Scott, why are you telling your story now?
I'm 60, and I think there's been a ton of tragedy in my life, but there's been a ton of joy. I mean, we'll get into it deeper from with more of these podcasts down the road, but I've lived all over the world. I've had too much fun. If I died today, I've had 3 times as much fun as the next most fun person. I've had my fair share of tragedy, but as I'm getting older, I look back at my life and I think, damn, it looks pretty interesting too. So why not make it into a podcast and talk to some people about it and see what they think? But if nobody listens, well, then they think it's boring. But like I said, I've had a ton of tragedy, a ton. I've had from the years of 2014 to 2024, were pretty tough, but also had a ton of fun. And nothing goes straight up in life. You got to have to take the good with the bad. But I'm a good example of how you can have being happy is a choice.
What do you mean by that? Being happy is a choice.
It's a choice. You can choose. You can choose to be happy, or you can choose to be sad. Bad things happen to a lot of people. More bad things happen to some than others. But being happy is a choice. You can make the decision to look at the good side of things rather than the bad side of things every day, and that's what I do. I'm tough on myself. I judge myself harshly. I have very long talks with my fat, naked self in the mirror every morning about trying to get better and make today a better day than yesterday was. But at the same time, I do have a ton of fun. And we've lived like I said, I've lived all over the world, traveled the world. I'm now down here in Nashville. It's a lot of fun here too, but so I make a choice. Being happy is a choice.
Let's end it right there. Until next time, see all of you later. Dee 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 dum dum da 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 dee 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 dee. E pa pa da 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 la da 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 pa da dum do 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 da da dum do pa la da 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 pa ta shi fu pu ko shi da 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 pa dum pum. Hippalara tipe fakachishma farano. La camara fucalara nishirifipa. Da parara papa papa li ti 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 ti. Caparara tapa papa. Hip titty ti poop fa papa cachimarana. Lo pororo no no nada more. Hey everybody, I am gonna disappoint all of you in that I am not getting the power is out, and that's a problem, you know what I mean? So I'm not on the radio, and I would love to just do a show for you guys, but not quite there yet, and I'm gonna work on that. So all of you, thank you for logging in and all that stuff. I don't even know how many people are there. I know it's a lot. So, but I appreciate it. So I'm going to just play. I can't play music, right? I guess I could play. What could I play? What would you like, just for the heck of it? That way you guys could talk, huh? Let me think about this. I could play Apalada Tapa Fapa Kichidi Mom. I think that the best thing is actually just to cancel and close down. Sorry about that. We'll pick it up tomorrow. But it's out of power in Hammond, so it is what it is. You know, I can actually still take a phone call. Isn't that crazy? Hey, you're still on the air, but you're only on YouTube. How's that sound? Hello?
Hello?
Hello, is Jed there?
Yeah, I didn't even hear that thing.